Welcome back. I'm Stacey Delicat. Thanks for being with us here on the Law and Crime Trial Network. News out of a Florida courtroom where a jury found Bob Ward guilty of manslaughter. Remember, prosecutors had wanted him guilty on second-degree murder charges. That's what he was convicted of the first time around back in 2011, but this time found guilty on the charge of manslaughter. Now, the judge had said she wanted to sentence him this afternoon, but Bob Ward's defense attorneys asked that sentencing happen at a later date. I'm joined via Skype by Law and Crime Trial analyst Julie Rendelman. Julie, what do you think of this verdict? He did better this time than the first time.
He did do better. We've been going back and forth of what we thought the result was going to be. I thought that he was going to be found guilty of a lesser charge, and I think for the first time I was right on this network. So. Yeah, I mean, look, it's still a lot potentially of time. I think he's facing up to 15 years. We were talking about this before, but he's already served 4. So it's going to be up to the judge to make a determination as to what that sentence is going to be.
Right, and we know that he already served about 4 years after his first conviction from 2011 until sometime in 2016 when that first verdict was overturned. So obviously that counts for something. It's interesting because something we discussed often leading up to this trial was that Ward was actually offered a plea deal before the second trial started to plead guilty and take a 10-year sentence. He turned that down in favor of a second trial. Now, we're not exactly sure what the judge will give him at the sentencing, but it seems like he could possibly break even almost for what would have happened if he had taken the plea.
He may break even. I mean, look, the judge has discretion, and I think the defense is right to wait before a sentencing is handed down, because I think they want to try to get as much information as possible. I know that they've done it before, but it's a new defense attorney that's doing it, and so they have every right, and if I was the attorney, I would do the same, is to put the case over to get as much ammunition as possible to get him a sentence as low as possible. You also, I think, had someone screaming, and I think it was his daughter, that might be also an issue why they want to wait for sentencing. Right.
I mean, and let's be clear, he was not acquitted on all charges here. He was still convicted of manslaughter, and what we heard was one of Bob Ward's daughters screaming out something explicit in the courtroom. The judge told her, be quiet, no outburst, and she said, arrest me, with some expletives in there. Right. So certainly some fireworks even at the very end of this trial.
It can't be easy for her. I mean, she's lost a mother and she's lost a father in certain ways. I mean, for her, thankfully, he's not getting the amount of time. He can't get the amount of time he did as he did when he originally was convicted of murder, but still he's going to be serving a significant time in jail. And so it can't be easy for her. And I think it's interesting to think about why the jury decided the way they did, only because, remember, we've talked about this many times, there was only 2 people in the room. One was the victim, who can't speak for herself, and the other is the defendant. So there was no eyewitnesses. So the jury really had to take some guesses as to what transpired in that room when she died.
Yeah, I'm curious, Julie, because you said, this is the first time you actually predicted right. What made you think during the course of this trial that the jury would settle on a lesser charge this time around?
I had trouble with the intentional murder aspect of this case, just because I thought the daughter's testimony in this case was credible and kind of telling in regards to making the jury question exactly what transpired in that room. They made it clear that she was a woman that drank not a little bit, but significantly. She popped pills regularly, and she had a temper and was potentially angry with Bob Ward for the issues regarding the finances. And that's very different from how the prosecutor kind of laid out their story. And so I thought the jury would have trouble with finding him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of that top count.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good point. No one knows for sure what happened in that room but the 2 of them, and it really was unclear exactly how far the gun was from her when it fired, and you can sort of really imagine the way that this struggle was painted in the bedroom. How do you expect his defense attorneys will approach this sentencing? Obviously, they will be asking for the minimum, right? They said they wanted a little bit of time to prepare. Why do you think that was?
I think they, I think they want to calm down for a minute. Look, they obviously didn't win, but they certainly did better than the first time around. And there's a huge difference with the sentencing guidelines for the murder than there are for the manslaughter. And so in certain ways, they can be relieved that he won't be doing the significant time he was before. But I think they want to kind of regroup and see what arguments they can make to push the judge to give him a lesser sentence than she might otherwise do.
Yeah, and we will have to wait and see what happens. Again, the judge had wanted to do the sentencing right then and there. She said, "Why? This is his second time around. Why wait and have another sentencing date? Do we really need a sentencing hearing?" But his defense attorneys obviously said yes, and I would imagine that most defense attorneys would do that in their shoes, right?
I mean, look, it's not normal. It's not regularly that we have 2 trials in a row. I understand her position. There's no need to do another probation report because he did one previously. So the information hasn't really changed. It may have, over the years, he may have some type of medical conditions that weren't dealt with before, something that in any way impacts the judge's decision on sentencing. But, the judge has leeway. She doesn't have a huge amount of leeway because if we're correct that it's between 9 and something and 15, then she's obviously bound between that. But I think it'll be really interesting to see what her final decision is. I'm also always curious if the jury
Let me stop you there, Julie. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with much more analysis of this manslaughter verdict.